Hi, I'm Lillian. Welcome back to my channel Ink and Pages. Today I have 4 books to talk about that I read in autumn. So let's just get into it. The first one is Through the Woods by Emily Carroll. This is the first of 2 spooky rereads I did in order to get myself in that Halloween spirit. This is a really wonderful graphic novel. That's not actually one long story, it's 5 short spooky stories. Each one has its own slightly different style of illustration and they're just all great. I just really love this book. It is all so beautiful, and not just the illustrations but the actual writing and narration itself too. Now, I don't think I truly love scary things, but I do like creepy things, I think I have come to realise. I don't know if I'd call this book horror exactly, but I'm also not sure what else I would call it. It's not gory, just incredibly creepy and ominous. And so I think you would like it if you do like being freaked out and scared out of your mind. But I also think you'd like it if you're more like me and you don't love being incredibly scared, but you are willing to give the odd creepy and unsettling story a go. I think the best way to describe this book would be to say that it's not scary in the same way as a serial killer with a chainsaw, but it's scary in the way that the deep dark woods are scary. And this time around, I think that my favourite short story was The Lady's Hands Are Cold, whereas previous times I would have said it was His Face All Red or The Nesting Place. But I gave it 4 stars. I loved it just as much as I have every other time I've reread it, and I just think it is the perfect Halloween read. Next, I reread Pretty Monsters by Kelly Link, which I also gave 4 stars again. This is a collection of fantasy and science fiction stories. Well, I'd say it's a lot more fantasy and like paranormal than science fiction. But just like Through the Woods, this was a reread, although unlike Through the Woods, it has been many years since I first read this. I think it might be a full decade since the first time I picked it up. It's just been hanging out on my shelves, and I always remembered it really fondly, and I did always have the desire to reread it one day, and I'm so glad I did because it was just as weird and magical as I remember it being. The story in here that I remember the most is called Magic for Beginners, and I think it's just the perfect story to start the entire collection. Basically, you start reading the story and it tells you about this TV show called The Library, and it's crazy and weird and just sounds really cool. And then in one of the episodes of The Library, there is a boy called Jeremy, and he and his friends love to watch The Library. And you're thinking, wait, but he's in the TV show? You told me right at the beginning that he was in the TV show. And they were telling me that in the TV show, he likes to watch the TV show, which he's not in? And I was so confused because, what? But then I decided to just go with it and not try and fixate on the internal logic of that story or the book. And once you do that, you're in the correct mindset to enjoy this book. And once you get over that initial stumbling block of logic, Magic for Beginners was just as weird and wonderful as I remember it being, and actually so was the entire collection. Every single story in here is weird in its own way, and if you go in knowing that, while also having no expectations, then you have the highest chance of enjoying this book. I'm normally quite good at going into a book and not expecting it to make complete sense right from the beginning, because what if there's world building that has to be established? Or what if the whole point is that there's something weird and confusing and mysterious going on and it's going to take a while to be explained? When starting any new book, you kind of have to hold your mind and imagination in this kind of limbo while you start filtering through the story for parts that are concrete and references that do make sense. And then eventually everything does click or start to make sense or fall into place, and you reach a point where you do understand the world and what is happening in the story. For this book, you need to keep your mind in that limbo for the entire thing. There's never an aha moment where the stories or the book starts to make complete sense to you, but that's all part of the fun. I have never read a short story collection like this, and it was excellent. This book has monsters and magic and wizards and ghosts and gods and TV shows so magical you want them to be real but they can't possibly be. And I have never actually heard anyone else on BookTube talk about this, so I would highly recommend it. Next, I read The Devil in the Dark Water by Stuart Turton. This was for the September Buzzwordathon prompt, which was to read a book with the word dark in the title. I never actually expected to pick this book up. I read the author's other book, The 7 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, last year and didn't really like it, gave it 2 stars. But it was coming time to pick my next Buzzwordathon read, and I was getting kind of desperate. I didn't want to read the obvious choice I had on my shelves, which was Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. So I found an ebook for this on my library and just decided to go for it. And I am so pleased I did. It was so surprising because it was actually really, really great. This is a historical mystery novel set on board a ship traveling from some Dutch colony, I'm not entirely sure where it's meant to be, I was picturing like Southeast Asia, back to Amsterdam. And it has this huge cast of characters, but the two we're mainly following are Arendt, who is the assistant slash sidekick to this famous detective called Sammy Pipps. And Sammy is also actually on board this ship, except that he has been falsely accused of a crime and has been arrested and is now being transported back to Amsterdam to face trial. And we also follow a woman called Sarah Wessel, not sure how to pronounce her last name because it's Dutch, and she is married to the Governor General, who's like a massive dick, but she is also investigating the mysterious events that start to take place on board. Because there is some weird, dangerous stuff that starts to happen. Actually started to happen before they even got on board the ship. And the atmosphere of the whole book is so oppressive and claustrophobic and creepy, and I would call this a gothic novel even, and it also talks about this devil character called Old Tom who may or may not be real. And I'm not going to say whether the story actually does have paranormal elements, but I think you need to go in with an open mind so that whether it does or doesn't, you're still going to have a good time. After The Seven Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle ended up being more sci-fi than murder mystery, I knew that this book also had the potential to surprise me with its eventual genre. And so I'm almost glad that I read Evelyn Hardcastle last year, because I do think that my previous experience with this author, while disappointing, did allow me to have a better time reading this book. I think he did a great job of laying out the clues and reveals and investigation in a really clear but interesting way, and the story did manage to keep up its momentum all the way through. And I like this story so much that I'm actually breaking my own rating conventions and using a half star. So this is getting 4.5 stars from me. It was so excellent, and it's definitely going to end up being one of my favourite books of this year. And finally, I read The Thursday Murder Club by Richard Osman. This was another Buzzwordathon pick. The prompt was to read a book with a day, month, or season in the title. And this is about 4 friends who live in a retirement village who get together every Thursday and look at old cold cases. And then one day there is an actual real murder very close to them, and they decide to investigate that as well. The writing style of this book kind of reminds me of The 100-Year-Old Man Who Climbed Out of the Window and Disappeared, in that it's quite light and ridiculous in a self-aware way, but by the end of the book that had started to get a bit grating, and because of this writing style, nothing ever felt really pressing or important or heavy as you might expect to find in a murder mystery like this. I did really enjoy it at the start, but by the end the writing, the plot and the characters were starting to lose their appeal for me, and I was ready for it to be over. And I think this had set up slightly too many different plot threads for them all to be resolved properly. Some characters fared better than others. I think that of the members of the Thursday Murder Club, Ibrahim was the only one who stayed consistent and consistently interesting throughout the entire book. Ron I lost interest in almost immediately, and Joyce didn't really need to be there either, let's be honest. And that feels a bit weird to say because most of the book is told through third person and we follow different characters in each of the chapters, but then also quite a lot of it is told by Joyce through diary entries. But in the end, it didn't really need to be, did it? And then Elizabeth had the most potential to be an interesting character, but that potential was not achieved by the end of the book. It was like the author kept dropping hints that she was really cool and interesting while not giving us much actual evidence to back that up sufficiently. But it did do some interesting things at the end, and I liked the reveal to the main murder mystery. It surprised me in a way that I can appreciate. The tying up of the main murder mystery plot at the end wasn't as neat and tidy as in other murder mysteries I've read, but I did like how that made it feel a little bit more realistic and interesting. But apart from a very few moments, the writing style meant that I didn't want to take any of it too seriously, and so I was never as invested in the story as I wanted to be. So I'm giving it 3 stars. I would still recommend it. I think it's a decent book, but it is by no means a new favourite for me. And now a brief word on my Nanowrimo process for this year. I'm very pleased I set myself a smaller target of 15,000 words because God knows it was a struggle this year. I tried to vlog it and that video will never see the light of day, but please enjoy a brief montage of clips that I have selected. So what went wrong? Firstly, when I was coming into November, I was getting over being ill, so that didn't help. And then my school had an inspection, which was as chill and fun as it sounds. And then I had a weekend away for a friend's birthday, and while I was hoping to get a lot of writing done on the train journeys there and back, that did not end up happening. So I get on the train at London Liverpool Street and we make our way into the countryside. I get on my laptop, I'm tapping away very happily, and we get into our first stop at Chelmsford and we sit there for a bit and the doors don't open. And then we sit there for a bit longer and the doors still don't open. And we sit there for a lot longer and everyone's starting to go, what the fuck's happening? And then they make an announcement to say that all of the doors on the train have broken. They're sending around the conductor to force open the doors one by one. And once they are open, we all need to evacuate because the train has broken down and it's been cancelled. The entire service has been cancelled and it's going back to the depot. Cue me being incredibly stressed, and I did manage to get on the next train, but by that point it was like the rush hour commuter train, so it was very stressful and crowded, didn't manage to get any more writing done, and the whole experience did put a bit of a damper over my writing plans for that weekend. And then I got ill again with another really horrible cold that knocked me out for several days. And at that point I was writing maybe 50 words a day just so I could say that I had written something. And then I was thousands of words behind and it was almost the end of November. So I decided to let myself break the rules a little bit and I took one extra day to finish Nanowrimo. And so on the 1st of December, I ended up writing my 15,000th word. So I did manage to write every single day in November, nowhere near as much as I wanted, but I did manage to write every day. I also managed to stick with my original story idea, the seaside murder mystery, for the majority of the month, which also really surprised me because I thought I would immediately give up on it and decide to write other projects. But I actually managed to stick with it for I think 3.5 weeks before I decided to mix it up. And it was actually only when I got ill that second time that I gave myself permission to write whatever the hell I wanted. And that is how I reached my word goal in the end. But I have proved to myself that on a better year, I could probably stick with the same project all the way through. So that's nice to know. And I did achieve my goal at the cost of some of my sanity and stress levels, which I won't be doing next year, but I did achieve it overall. So that brings this reading and writing wrap up to its conclusion. Thank you so much for watching and I will see you in my next video. Bye!